Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Will Robbins. I lead customer success here at Monte Carlo, and I'm joined by Gopi Krishnamurthy, who is the Director of Engineering at Blinkist. And the subject for today's webinar is we're going to be talking about how Blinkist has brought data observability into their organization and how they're using that to reduce data downtime and increase ROI. Just a couple of real quick housekeeping notes before I pass things off to Gopi. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar, please drop them into the chat. I'll ask some to Gopi as we go, and then we'll also pause probably midway through and also at the end to make sure we hit on any of the other questions. Also, just know that the session is going to be recorded, and that recording will be sent out to all the folks that registered, and then I think we'll also make it available on our website eventually. With that, I'm excited to pass things off to Gopi.
Hey, thanks, Will. Hope you can hear me properly.
Yep, hear you great.
All right. So, hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on reducing downtime, thereby increasing ROI, not just on the marketing side, that's the business focus and outcome, but also the overall engineering efficiency in terms of productivity and predictability. Once again, I take time to thank you, everyone, from joining around the globe. I'm talking to you from Berlin. It's been a quite chilly week. Today is okay, bearable. I have my hoodie on. And it's time also to go to bed for me right after this, but I'm quite excited. And thanks for others from different parts of the world, those who are working up early or staying late like myself. I'm totally excited to be sharing this experience that we have had with Blinkist, at Blinkist, and how Monte Carlo has helped us to be where we are today in terms of data observability and data trust with our internal and external stakeholders. Before going into the meat of the content, I would like to briefly take you through Blinkist. If you are not aware of Blinkist, we are a Berlin-based startup founded in 2012 with a mission that everyone can fit learning into their life. So we offer a 15-minute summaries of non-fiction books and podcasts. We have around 16 billion happy customers of our product with a 35% daily active users, which is one of our North Star metrics that we actively monitor and make sure that this contributes to our business outcomes and growth. If you have not tried our product so far, please do take a chance to use our product. We have a 7-day free trial with full access to all our contents that includes 4,000 books and amazing original content that we produce from different authors, influencers, and podcast hosts. So feel free to check it in. Short intro about me. My name is Gopi Krishnamurthy. I lead a bunch of amazing data and technology specialists here at Blinkist. In my role as director, I'm usually associated with delivering business outcomes in the area of data, infrastructure, cloud engineering, center of excellence, growth, and monetization programs. I have a natural affinity towards data products, and that's one of the key reasons why I'm doing this webinar and happy to be co-hosting with Monte Carlo. In my free time, excluding my family and kids, I love to write blogs, speak in conferences, also on meetups, and share experiences as a catalyst for startups and small-scale companies when it comes to data initiatives or scaling teams and so on. Of course, you can follow me in my handle that I've given here. That's the same for all my professional social networks. And to hit the road. As the title says, as with any fast-paced growing company, Blinkist, in 2020, we started with the high growth goals. When we say high, it was in the range of greater than 40% year on year. And we were successful in the past years before 2020 through the hyperscale phase, where we were able to reach such high year-on-year growth goals. When it comes to growth, our growth engine, as with many other, could be with many other startups, is fueled by performance marketing, especially in the subscription market. Most marketing, at least the modern marketing channels like Facebook, Instagram, Pinpoint, and so on, are fueled with AI power nowadays, and they can auto-optimize these campaigns with little or no manual intervention from channel managers. On one hand, this is really great because the platform is doing this for you. On the other hand, this also means that we are heavily relying on the quality of the tracking data that we produce, that we clean and make sure that it's sent to these platforms. And the second dimension is also the timeliness of the delivery of these data pipelines. What we observed the beginning of 2020 is we started the year very strong as usual, because that's one of our core seasons where we see a peak in most of the subscription businesses. But as the world realized the severity of the pandemic, we saw a steep decline in our growth goals. This is what I try to show in the graph, where you see the revenue targets going down month on month. The correlation is marked with the marketing spend. So normally our trend is our channels spend more and can scale to the budgets that we define, as long as these campaigns are performing fine. So that's basically the auto optimization these channels take care. And you can see the channels are not scaling and are trying to spend it down because we are not performing great. With T2 as going into the term 2, we split the year into not into quarters but into 4 months. So as we went into term 2, we knew our targets is going to be tougher, and we need to innovate and be faster to produce these results. We had to heavily rely on data to make such quick and accurate decisions, or to adapt to any of these market fluctuations. Our business case sweet spots, like for example, in our case, when we fit our product as 15-minute key insights, this was a best case for commute use cases. And this was kind of came to a standstill with the whole world not doing as much commute as they were supposed to do, which means we have to find a lot more new business cases. At the same time, we were also competing with in the non-essential subscription industry, where as customers were really trying to question their spend in terms of this uncertain economy that we had. Nevertheless, we as a company, we saw that there was an opportunity. There was an opportunity knocking our door to innovate with new ideas. This means that we had to predict these data decisions that could scale our growth and discover these new sweet spots. Which means that we have to do a lot of these experiments faster and get accurate results. The campaigns and the features, the creatives that our teams created, we want to get as much insights that we want to build and needs to be accurate. What we actually saw was these opportunities and the campaigns and the reactions that we did to this kind of had a short-term impact. But then overall, the trend was kind of flat. That's what we observed. Meanwhile, in the data world, behind the scenes, things were slowly kind of heating up. As I mentioned, the product teams were equally excited about this new opportunity and were turning a lot of brilliant ideas. We have great minds there, creating some cool features, improving our onboarding funnel, marketing teams coming up with great creatives, amazing CRM campaigns. People were so much excited on the one end of the spectrum. At the same time, on the other end of the spectrum, our key stakeholders like campaign managers or the C-level executives from our CTOs to COOs to CMOs, they all depended on this key insight to drive our strategy, to drive our marketing strategy, to drive our spend and budgets, to keep an eye on our return of investment. And we were really struggling with data downtimes. When I say data downtime, it's an encompass of data quality issues, data delays, broken pipelines, complete mistrust in data. And this is what we try to call as data downtime. There was a significant gap in terms of relationship because of such scenarios. And in between the sandwich, the data teams were struggling to firefight this issue, to regain trust, to steer the business insights. Sure.
Like data downtime was a big issue. Like if you could eyeball it, like how many days out of a month or something were you guys facing data issues?
Yeah. In our case, we had the executive boards every Monday, and almost every Monday I was in this call and trying to answer why we are not able to scale, what were the issues, and how much problems do we face in terms of tracking data, and this was happening almost every week in terms of trying to explain the severity of the problem and also trying to boost the confidence in the stakeholders. So this was happening every week in terms of key stakeholders. And in terms of days, I would say it was happening almost 2-3 days every week. So it's like half the time our teams were fighting on solving these issues.
Really interesting. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, moving on to term 3. So we had a clear call for action. As I mentioned, we have a brilliant team who have great respect for each other. We sat together and we kind of created a call for action on the data teams to take end-to-end accountability of data and restoring trust in our data. These focus areas were basically, first and foremost, performance marketing, because that's our core growth engine, so that we can scale, we can spend more on our campaigns, and also we can reach our spend and ROI goals. This means we have to make sure all our data streams, most of the time, these data streams are real-time or live, and are constantly feeding these platforms, which are generating new insights, which are targeting new customers. And there was, and the feedback was from these marketing managers was they don't want any downtime. At the same time, data coming from these channels, which convert into insights that is available for the channel managers or to the C-level. This also needs to be on time so that we can adjust our targets, increase our targets for when we are performing really well, or decrease it, and so on. So to kind of have this steering wheel going correctly. Secondly, we had a clear focus on our customer experience. So we said like we could not afford to have any disruptions in our user onboarding experience. Our CRM system has to have an accurate data to make our email campaigns successful, to have our push notification bring the maximum win back of customers and are reaching the right target audience. And the third focus area is a combination of product and data teams. So we had to be on one hand trying to firefight and make sure that we have trust in the data and bring data issues under control. At the same time, we had to innovate faster. We have to build data products. We have to build features in the product. We have to run A/B test experiments that drive a lot of our business decisions. And we have to also focus on this. And this is a key part of our engineering efficiency in terms of predictability and in terms of productivity. In summary, our stakeholders needed kind of 100% trust in data, and our engineers wanted to go back and do what they want to do instead of firefighting these issues, rather focus on our core business problems and find solutions for this core business problem. Yeah, following this, we brainstormed and we came out with a framework which is based on Spotify's thoughtful execution framework. At the core of this framework is data reliability engineering, where we treat data reliability as a first-class citizen, the same way engineering teams in the last decade started to treat DevOps or site reliability engineering. This is the first focus point that we try to bring a change in the mindset, a change in the culture. The key focus areas were data governance, data quality, and refactoring of a lot of our systems. For the sake of this webinar here, we would try to focus more on the data governance side and data quality side of things, and less of refactoring, which is still an important dimension, especially when you have hyper-growth teams which are scaling month on month tremendously and year on year having a target like this. This is still an important factor, but here we focus more on the data observability and data quality side of things. With these two dimensions, we wanted to be really what we call as brutally honest and about setting data reliability expectations. We decided to take site reliability principles and started applying them one by one into our data landscape. We made our data stakeholders understand all of these key terms like what is a service level agreement? What is a service level objective? What are we going to measure? What are we going to give you as data points to instill the stress back on how we run these data operations? So this was before going into the details of what was done on the technology side. This was also equally important to bring this mindset, to bring this culture shift, not just on the engineering side or on the data side, but also on the stakeholder side, that they can understand these principles and consider it in our business culture.
Hey Gopi, are you still showing the solution hypothesis slide? It sounded like you tried to advance, and I just wanted to make sure we're on the same slide.
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm just going to go to the next one. Yeah, thanks. Cool. Before going into the different scenarios, playing out how it worked for us, just want to give like a 20,000, 10,000 feet overview. I don't know if everybody understands feet, but let's say it's high up from the helicopter or from an aeroplane trying to look our landscape. We have our product that is sending a lot of this tracking data that goes into our pipelines, which then goes into our core data platform, which is like a lakehouse architecture, a combination of data lake and a core warehouse that runs on a native data warehouse. In terms of performance marketing, one of the two main channels, apart from the 12 other channels that we have, is Facebook and Google, which is probably the same for many of our audience here. And we used to send all of this tracking data into these channels. At the same time, drive the insights out of these channels also to improve our product and our features. What we try to do is on the left-hand side. So previous to this, we always applied site reliability engineering principles, DevOps principles for our product stack, from our engineering stack. But when it came to data landscape, this was something was never considered and was never given the equal importance. And this is the focus that we start to shift, that we try to bring in data reliability engineering principles, where Monte Carlo played a key role for us to easily adopt and to show how to meet the expectations in a short time of frame. So I want to run you through with, let's say, a couple of scenarios how this helped us. The first scenario that we observed before implementing the solution was that there was a lot of mistrust on how tracking worked. People were not clear about it. There were complaints about tracking data. There were also a lot of confusion around data infrastructure, how data infrastructure worked. It was no longer as simple as having a database or an Excel spreadsheet, but there was a complex data infrastructure that was running, and there was a lot of backend pipelines, which as a data native person with no engineering background were hard to understand the architecture around it. And they considered it something like rocket science. There was also a lot of losses. There was underperformance, and most of the time, these losses and underperformance somehow was always attributed to the data issues that we have had. Partly, it could have been also accurate. What our stakeholders could not see actually is there were a lot of these legacy infrastructure that we built ourselves in the last 8 years, and we never really upgraded them, and they needed constant pat in the back to keep them up and running. And this is the monitoring and firefighting that our teams had to do. To build the resiliency and to be proactive on these required a lot of effort, a lot of context switches on our engineering teams, especially on the data engineers and sometimes even the data analysts. There were broken data models because we were innovating at a much faster pace, especially in this special times, and we could not proactively figure out all these data issues. And the stakeholders found it difficult to look through beyond the data issue smoke. It was a cloud that was formed due to data issues, and it was difficult to clear this and see through this to see the business outcomes. So that was the reality before, and the solution hypothesis that we try to apply here is try to bring the data observability to our pipelines and to our data sets in our core warehouses.
Gopi,
Yep. Go ahead.
You mentioned 6-figure revenue opportunity. Like any particular examples that were particularly painful or anything like that you could share?
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned in some of the meetings, we always talk about Facebook, which is one of our biggest channel. Probably everyone in the audience would have read about an article with the current state. Facebook and Google contributes to like 62% of the overall marketing landscape. So this means that sometimes when we have issues with tracking, could be as simple as a broken pipeline that didn't send data to our platforms, and we could not realize we didn't see this for, let's say, for a day. This means our daily budget that we allocated on this platform is drastically affected, mostly in the area of, so for instance, a number that I can give is somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000, where we had to incur losses in terms of how they could scale, because they are going to scale down slowly, but there was an opportunity that we missed. It is more the opportunity cost rather than many times the actual cost, because the platforms are scaling down gradually, but the opportunity that we missed is really hurting us, and that's basically where this number comes into picture.
Thanks.
Cool. What we ended up in this scenario basically is we have now real-time monitoring of our data sets and data pipelines. All these alerts and incidents are automatically tracked, communicated to our stakeholders at different steps of our incident management process that are all now linked and to tools like Monte Carlo and or any other site reliability tools that you have for the other end of the engineering spectrum. This is basically what I tried to show here, that where there's an alert coming, people understand what's the alert, what's the priority associated with it, and who is working on it, what is the current state of it. That's the on the top of the screen. On the bottom is we also ended up creating some kind of an anomaly detections, which tells us how fresh is the data, or are there any changes that were done in the upstream that could potentially disrupt our pipelines. And this was quite useful for us. And with the time frame that we were working on, this is not something we could build automatically in our landscape. And this is basically the power of AI and that runs behind Monte Carlo comes into picture, that we were able to quickly find these kind of anomalies and can have actions that can be done based on this. Plus, there is a lot of tribal knowledge. So if you have to build such a tool, you need to have a lot of tribal knowledge to create alerts and to build those business rules. Monte Carlo made the life easier in terms of detecting these anomalies, in terms of freshness, in terms of data volume, in terms of data model changes. And this was quite helpful for us to act at the right time and to make sure the downtime is reduced or even prevented.
One question related to this.
Go ahead, shoot me. Yeah.
Is one of the questions that came in from the audience what are some of the short-term steps you took to try to increase trust in data while you simultaneously looked at some longer-term options?
Yeah. If I go back to the hypothesis, for us, the longer term is the refactoring side of things. So, which is something we could not do on the short term. The short term impacts was trying to be transparent, to bring this transparency in our pipelines, to show that when there was an impact, then we try to highlight it, because most of the channel managers could know what is the alternate for it. They could feed some other data, or they could have other business as usual setup that they could rely on. Most of the mistrust came because they were not aware of it. So to bring this observability and transparency is the short-term goal that we thought that could bring a lot of value to our stakeholders. And this is exactly where the sweet spot of adopting a tool like Monte Carlo is there, because in our case, we adopted we ran a POC for 2 weeks or something, because primarily the POC is for the machine learning models behind Monte Carlo to understand our data. But once the model was ready, we could immediately see what was happening day to day. We could see that there was a broken pipeline. There was a table that was not updated. There was a table that had changed its data model because something was added or deleted on the upstream. So all this was immediately visible to our data engineers as a first step. But the same thing, we also made it available to our stakeholders in turn, so that they knew exactly what was happening. They knew who were accountable. They knew the teams who were working on it, and everything became crystal clear. And this was the short-term trust that we could bring. Although we could not fix a lot of things, which we had to take after recognize, but just recognizing the problem and making it transparent to the stakeholder already gave them the trust that people are looking into it and they will fix it. Does it help? Yeah.
Timing around that, and not to jump too much into like Monte Carlo mode, but I think from when we first started talking to when we set up Monte Carlo in your system was 9 days. So that's like relatively short term. And then it was 2 weeks after that your team got access to the UI,
yeah, exactly,
and getting alerts and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So moving on to the next scenario. This is where I wanted to bring a little bit on the CRM side of the marketing campaigns. What we had before was a set of broken customer experience in terms of onboarding flows or daily engagement, thereby creating a lot of tickets for our customer service or even the NPS scores going down. What we could not see as data teams or our data stakeholders is that there needed an extensive collaboration in such cases, that what changed on the upstream, which product teams are delivering what functionalities, why is certain daily engagement campaigns are not reaching the targeted audience. And we have to really run through a lot of workshops, research trains to come and narrow down the problem and fix them subsequently. This means there was a longer turnaround because the teams were so disconnected, they could not relate how data was connected. In a fast-paced company like us, it's also important to know that this is changing rapidly for the teams to catch up at the same pace. So what we try to build here as a solution hypothesis is we started defining the site reliability principles. We started to define SLAs, not just for our stakeholders to say what would be the SLA, the service level agreement for our data operations, data pipelines, data sets, but also delegating the same service level agreements to our upstream, who produces this data. This kind of cohesively sit together, that people talked about this, made sure that data disruptions have come down. This is what we have today. We try to bring the transparency in terms of these SLAs, SLOs, and SLIs that you can see here. What is cool about this is they are available in a self-service mode for our stakeholders. They could see these metrics. They can understand what is happening. For instance, let's say, as a channel manager, you see a particular campaign is not performing and have your own doubts on whether it's because of a data, then he or she could go and look into these pipelines, the status of them, what's happening in the last 7 days. what has been happening in the last 30 days. So they get kind of a feeling if everything is green and if the SLAs are met, then they know it's not a data issue and they can focus on maybe something is wrong with the campaign, or maybe the creatives needs to be changed. Maybe the audience has to be someone different and so on. So it brought this kind of observability that converted into transparency and self-evaluation of whether it's a problem with the data or is it a problem in terms of business goals. The second is also what we were able to see is we were able to drill down these metrics at a high level to individual components, and thereby we could even go and set these SLAs to our upstream and say that, hey, here is a pipeline that heavily depends on this data that is produced by this team. Please make sure these SLAs are met. And they were able to, as an upstream system, they could not, they don't need to rely on the overall SLA, but they could just say that, okay, here is the pipeline that I produce a lot of data and I will make sure that I maintain this. And this is an aggregation of both their pipeline as well as the data sets. So the quality of the data is a combination of both. The second cool part is, again, more coming from the rule sets point of view. There were a lot of these rules which depended on the semantics of the data that we could set. One, we could create these anomaly detections on these semantics as well. Like if we find a particular profile of a table doesn't meet usually the semantics and the understanding of this data, then we get alerts as well. So let's say if we find a steep decline in a particular metrics that we calculate daily, and we see suddenly there is completely null in this column, or the trend is going down, this is a clear indication for us something went wrong in the upstream, and there is an alert for such data. Or we have a known rule set that you want to create some kind of a rule breach and so on. This was so cool for us because again, we did not rely heavily on this tribal knowledge and a lot of discussions, documentations, but we could see data issues detection live by looking into Monte Carlo data. Yeah, this is the two scenarios that I wanted to cover, but also would like to give like a bonus as everybody. For us, there was a scheme on top, which we didn't anticipate when we started the journey. Our focus was how could the data teams create this, but then we ended up more like a self-service anomaly detection, where as power users in our company, there are a lot of power users who are data-driven, not just in the engineering teams, not in the data engineering and analyst, but also in the business side. There is a lot of power users who would like to keep track of things. So this is a screenshot that you see from Monte Carlo, which not just acts as a data observability tool, but it also gives you like a feel of a modern data catalog where you see your key data assets. You can connect to the upstream links to your data assets, and you can see the downstream assets that are connected to these data assets, and all the other dimensions of this data asset in terms of what are the incidents that is related. Is this incident relating to the freshness or the volume of the data, and who is working on it? So basically, it gives you the 360-degree of your data catalog, but not just focusing on the business semantic side, but also on the operation side, which seems to be like the sweet spot for us to tap into and make use of it. Will is there. Please reach out to Will. There is a lot of cool other features that is there in their product roadmap, but I found this very interesting for our teams to adopt. And this self-service in turn, what brought us is the trust back in data, because people were seeing this in action. They see things going from red to a work in progress or blue, or to resolved in green. So they could see this in action, and this brought back the trust in the data that we wanted to bring. Of course, this webinar would not happen if there was no fairy tale ending, but I would like to be a little bit cautious on what we achieved and try to show. The positive trend is we ended up avoiding a lot of data downtime, meant that the channels were able to scale. The early detection of these data issues meant the impact was not long lasting, and we were able to correct this impact. For instance, most of the time the channels had this window of 24 hours. So if we were able to detect issues and fix them within this 24-hour window, Facebook and Google were able to autocorrect and never had to go into these big data losses. So this early detection helped us to fit into this SLA of 24 hours in certain cases with specific channels and specific data sets. And finally, the trust in data was there because of the trust in the decisions that we could make. You can see the upward trend. As I mentioned, the trend is not solely because of data, and I would not be taking all the credit, but definitely the phase one of what we started as data reliability engineering had started to bring us what we wanted somewhere in beginning December, and we can already see the progress that we are making. Normally, New Year, a lot of people take a lot of resolutions, and there is a sweet spot for us in terms of subscription learning businesses that people sign up. But the scale that we saw was overwhelming. Although the full credit is not just for the data teams, but definitely I think the things that we were able to do in terms of data observability, in terms of bringing transparency in the data operations, definitely improved a lot of our how we targeted our audience, how we targeted our channels and channel operations. The additional value is our data engineers can now go back and focus on our core business problem, try to bring more into recommendations of our product, and more focus on the B2C customer side of things, and worry less about business operations side of things. Like to end this with some key takeaways that we found it interesting, that I thought could be interesting for you guys as well. When you are in a journey to reduce data downtime, like how we were 3-4 months back, I think having data observability part of your SRE, site reliability engineering or DevOps culture, whichever you're following, I think this is one key thing. We need to accept this. We need to bring those principles into data teams, into the data landscape. Service level agreements are key part of our data pipelines, and in terms of data sets and data pipelines, because it not only sets the expectations of your stakeholders, because many times people don't understand what is this wiggle period through which you can make sure that the impact is not long lasting. On the other side, it also gives us a way how to delegate this back into other teams or decentralize these things into the upstream teams. The third thing is always try to bring the transparency of the impact. If there is a problem, then as a stakeholder, they have every right to know about this problem, so they can clearly see how can they mitigate this problem. Many times this visibility doesn't exist, especially in terms of data operations and engineering side. And this is running in blind is always a bigger problem for business. And this transparency is bringing this transparency is key. Decentralizing the data quality was the other thing that we tried to do. So whenever we had problems, we created tickets, we created alerts and this went back. This was not a sole accountability of data teams, but also it went back into the product teams to look into the issues and try to fix them. And win back the trust by showing them, by asking your data stakeholders, doing it in a self-service way. This is when you do it yourself, you gain more trust than when someone says it to you. With this, I would like to thank you all for joining. As I said, I think it was a wonderful experience. Will and the whole team in Monte Carlo helped us a lot in terms of this onboarding, bringing our teams, and also it's also a sharing where we were able to share our experience and contribute to the product roadmap of Monte Carlo. It was a great journey there. Please reach out to Will. They have a lot of materials available, a lot of every day I see a lot of new learnings coming out of different people who are using Monte Carlo. So please reach out to Will if you have further questions on them, or if you have questions on Blinkist and how engineering teams work in Blinkist, how we are going into the next phase of our data reliability engineering. Definitely Monte Carlo is a key part there as well. But feel free to reach me. I'm happy to share our experiences from my side or from my team who can talk to your teams. Thank you so much. I hand it back to Will.
Gopi, thank you. That was awesome. And there's a whole bunch of questions that came through the chat that I want to pose to you. But first off, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for putting this all together. Like your story is awesome. It makes me feel very good.
Thanks so much. It was wonderful. Yeah.
So one of the questions that came in, how long did it take you to kind of configure all the different rules or thresholds, or did it take any time at all?
The first thing that we did was we never configured any rules. We just let the algorithm do what it can and try to validate this. So I don't know if I showed you this. Maybe I quickly go back to this slide here. When we look into these alerts that come in, Monte Carlo has this cool feature to say, is this expected? Is this a false alarm? And so on. So update the status. So the first thing that we did was just to observe what the machine was doing and how accurate was it, and try to calibrate this. That was the key thing, the first thing that we did. Meanwhile, as we were observing this, we were trying to bring in these rules. The rules, most of the time, the rules are pretty straightforward. In our case, we started with our North Star metrics. We tried to break down our North Star metrics into different domain-driven metrics, and each of these domain-driven metrics had a rule set. That's basically the simplest we went, because this could already give us a lot of insight into where the impact is.
And I'd add to that is there's a lot of value you can get from Monte Carlo without setting any rules. Actually, most of our monitors and alerting systems require no input from you. We just observe what the historical behavior of these tables looks like, and we alert to any sort of deviations from that historical norm, which it turns out can capture the vast majority of the kinds of data issues that can pop up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this is one of the key reasons for us to go with Monte Carlo, because we had no time to invest on this. Literally, we were kind of chasing more than 24 hours if possible. So this was like that was a key criteria for us to go towards Monte Carlo, to lean towards Monte Carlo.
Thanks. Another question that came in, and actually, I think some of the more technical questions might be, because there's a couple that came in that are pretty technical. I would suggest just pinging those questions to me directly over email. I'll put my email, or actually my email's on the screen right now, but I want to hit the things that are a little bit more general.
Yep.
So one is around who owns Monte Carlo within Blinkist. So specifically the question is, can I confirm that at Blinkist, the DevOps team owns Monte Carlo and providing the observability metrics? In some companies, it may seem that it's a data engineering responsibility.
Yeah.
How do you guys think?
Yeah, in Blinkist, data engineering is a foundational service, which means that it's part of the core cloud engineering team. We do have data engineers embedded with different mission teams, like similar to platform engineers, but then there is also a core team. And this core team's responsibility is also SRE and DevOps. So it's an answer. Probably it's not helpful for you, but in our case, it was data engineering team who started, but this team was part of the core platform team, which also took care of the overall DevOps SRE metrics.
Another one, how did you set the SLA baseline for data downtime or data observability? Maybe a broader question is like, what do you track when you think of tracking data observability or data downtime?
Yeah. For us, the baseline was not clear. We just had a talk to the stakeholders. We just went and asked our stakeholders and said that, hey, yeah, we are seeing at least 2-3 days of issues per week. What would be your ideal scenario? Are you okay to have like one issue? I mean, I was joking around yesterday with Will that we had 2020 where AWS had a downtime, Google had a downtime. So we knew that there is no way we could promise an SLA that there is no downtime. So the only thing we wanted to say is what is acceptable to you. This is basically the first thing that we did. We went back to our stakeholder, asked them, what is your acceptable in terms of impact, in terms of no impact. So in terms of no impact was everybody said most of the time our operations are day to day. So we are okay if the impact is within the 24-hour period, then we could act on it or react on it. And for a month, it was mostly 1 day in a month. So that's the maximum we could afford. And basically we started from there and then started fine tuning it. So that was the minimum acceptable or maximum acceptable, however, how you want to see. And from there, we started to refine them. So the answer is, this is, we didn't see this as our responsibility, but we saw this by talking to our stakeholders, asking them what is acceptable for them. Maybe there was a second part which I missed. So could you repeat?
No, it's super helpful. I think like in general, people are just wondering like, tracking observability, tracking data downtime, like how do you even begin to think about applying numbers to something like that? Because it can feel a little squishy sometimes. And I think like some of the ways we thought about it, we've talked about this in the past, is like tracking days out of the month or something. Like you had a little bit of conversation like days out of the week, something like that. Mm-hmm. And then another big value lever we see is who are the people that are discovering the issues? Is it if it's and when issues are discovered, do they then get communicated to the appropriate stakeholders? So part of building trust in the data team is if it's the actual data users or your customers that are discovering the data issues, then that's a recipe to lose a lot of trust. But even if there are still issues, but it's the data team that's finding them, and when they emerge, the data team's able to communicate them out in a timely fashion. That's a way that you can manage trust much better.
Yeah, exactly, 100% on it. Yeah.
Reading through a couple of the other questions. There's a question specifically from Sudamini, specifically around financial services. So maybe I'll ask it, and Gopi, let me know if this is something that's better for me to handle. Earlier in the presentation, you mentioned anomalies and event tracking. Can the system detect things like certain customers are blocking client-side events, especially large enterprises like financial services?
Yes, I think this is something that platforms can handle, because most of the companies now have to adhere, whether it's financial or non-financial, have to have consent, have to obey the data protection laws on the EU side or on the US side. So I think it's now becoming clear. The question is, in those cases, it is something how your platforms react to them, rather than we are making some anomaly detections. So it's something that is handled even before anomaly detections are, at least in our case, done. I do not know the internal side from Monte Carlo. Maybe you have some inputs, but for us, we see the privacy and blocking settings happening even before the data is coming into our pipelines for further processing. So it's something that's happening right in the first stage of our pipelines. First thing that we check is, do we have consent? Do we need to block certain things, and so on.
Got it. Yes, Sudamini, it might be good if you just shoot me a note, and maybe we can follow up with some more detail that's pretty specific to your use case. And also, Ashot, the question you asked was just a little bit more on the technical end of the spectrum. And please shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to sync with you about it. With that, I think that's all the other questions that we had. So I just want to take a moment to thank you again, Gopi, for joining us. This was a ton of fun. It's exciting to hear your story. Yeah, looking forward to continue to work with you. And thank you, everybody that stuck with us for pretty much a full hour. That was great.